Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We really appreciate that you're coming here wanting to get some more information about what's going on and how we can better serve you as the businesses in our community and outer lining areas. So we'll get started real quick here. Bathrooms are around the corner over here. And of course, there's pastries and coffee if you need it. And so first and foremost, let me invite you to hear from our first speaker, which would be Dr. Soydemir. Are you going to use this, sir? Let's give him a round of applause, huh? Thank you, sir.
Back there? Good, okay. Okay, well, I read recently on, I think, CNBC that the economy was behaving in such a way that any story you tell would be consistent. So why? Because interest rates are at an all-time high, as you know, generational high. So that would be consistent with a slowing economy. On the other hand, we have a rebounding stock market and somewhat falling inflation. That would be good, consistent with a recovering economy, growing economy. But then we have mortgages at an all-time low, inflation. So if you look at it from another perspective, stubborn. Just today, wholesale prices came out 0.6% per month, which corresponds to about 7.2%, twice the expected rate. So it would be consistent for an economy going into a recession. So this presentation I have here hopefully will allow us to delve more into to the existing data and stick with our story because we did our forecasts analysis back in November, and the actual data has been have been coming in since then, giving us some direction into the next report we're gonna coming up with in May. Okay, so it's gonna be the update report. In some areas we have under forecasted. In other areas we have over forecasted. And most of them, luckily, we were right on the ball. Under forecasting sometimes means pessimistic. In other variables, it would mean optimistic. But I'll get into those as I show you some of the more important graphs and bar charts that I'll be showing you. To give you some background, yeah, interest rates, I mean, 7.49%. It's been at a generational high. Last time they were like that was in 2001, okay? So some people say, well, that's the new normal. Well, it's not for me because if you take the average of that 30-year mortgage rate, it boils down to like 3 or 4%, okay? 7.49 is crashing the car market right now. The car market is doing really bad. So everybody is waiting for the Fed to cut rates. But, you know, the Federal Reserve just announced, before that in December, they were going to have 3 rate cuts, right? So the market began expecting aggressive rate cuts in 2024. Guess what? We're at the end of first quarter. Are we seeing any rate cuts? No, but rationally, the Fed is saying, well, we're not there yet. You know, the inflation is not near the target rate of 2%. Therefore, we're going to hold off until the second half of 2000. So that actually did not go well with the categories that we're going to be seeing in a little while, and the inflation has been very stubborn. But really, the inflation is not being driven. What is driving inflation is the price of oil, okay, and shelter. Retail inflation, the CPI just got announced, and what led to 3.1 annualized inflation rate was shelter and exactly the price of oil, okay? And with these regional conflicts, it's going to stay like that. That's what's causing it, and that's what's driving inflation. Food prices, on the other hand, have been pretty. They're seeing the pressure to go down, okay? So they're being sort of stable on the retail side, not on the wholesale side. But and that's why, from our standpoint, the Valley, you're seeing a disproportionate impact, right? Disproportionate because of agriculture. We're seeing energy costs increase. So you're seeing that cost pressure. On the other side, you're seeing the downward pressure. So it's hurting our farmers, and some of them in the almond industry, they're having to go bankrupt, okay? So stubborn inflation, the Fed just announced that we're closer to the 2% than before. Last year, the inflation was like 8%, okay? So that's good. Real rate of interest was negative last year. This year it became positive as inflation went down to 3%. Where is it standing at? At 1.64, okay? That's from the banking side, that's very important. I'll show you in a little bit. Okay, total employment. Let's see if I can find the laser point. Oh, okay, here. See, this is when the Great Recession hit, okay, in 2008. So if you extended this line all the way here, were those losses ever recovered? No, okay? We've never recovered those jobs, employment losses when the big recession hit. And this is here when COVID hit. Well, we're getting there, I mean, and then we have this slowing economy, okay? Now, what is this? These are the actual lines, the red ones, the actual data that's coming in. The dark lines are our forecasts, okay? So we forecast a range, upper range, lower range, mean range. And if the actual data falls in that range, then it's an accurate forecast, okay? So what's been happening? There are certain peculiarities here. In 2023, see these spikes here? These are seasonal spikes, and during the harvest season, our economy does really well. Okay, spikes. So what we did we see any spikes here? No. Okay, so in a very strong month, in a very strong quarter, which is July, August, and September. Okay, we have the biggest peaks there. Okay, seasonal peaks. This last August, July, okay, and September, we didn't see that. Not only that, there was a decline, okay? And if you look at the data, okay, this green line you see here, this green line is 2023. The blue is 2021. The red is 2022, okay? So if you look at the green one, what's happening there? It's slowing down, right? It's slowing down. Our valley economy, in fact, when the national economy slows down, we slow down more, okay? There's a disproportionate impact. And that being, we have more unskilled work here, okay? 73% of our workers are unskilled, and they're on the front lines. Every time the economy, slows down, contracts, they're the ones to be laid off first. The greater the skill you have, the harder it is for you to be laid down. In fact, when you look at like education and health services, it's just one straight line, and it doesn't get affected by recessions, et cetera, because people have to have health care and they have to have education. So back to back, negative, declining. Last time that happened was in 2008. So that's peculiar, okay? Why is that peculiar? Because we just realized, January employment went up, right? January employment numbers went up. But at the same time, unemployment rate went up as well. Now, how is it that unemployment rate goes up simultaneously with employment? Because of inflation. Because of inflation, there's a lot of movement in the labor market. People are trying to find, change jobs and find higher paying jobs, right? So there's this transitional component that's going in there. Those that are not in the labor force, they come into the job market, they're looking for work, and that creates, causes unemployment rate to go up. The way to interpret this is this: look at this typical rate. Okay, this is the 20-year average, 1.9. That's what our employment grows at total. Okay, in 2001, that's very good. And look at 2020, 5%. Amazing, phenomenal growth, right, in employment. But then look at 2023. Okay, some may argue, well, that's because of mean reversion. There was a lot of growth here, then this is going to happen. But nevertheless, we must flag that. That's a negative, the first negative, decline in employment levels since 2008, not counting COVID. Okay. Now, our forecasts are indicating, given what the Fed is doing right now, is that employment levels are going to go down a little bit more, and then there's going to be a recovery in 2025, and that's because the Fed is holding off on cutting rates. Once they start cutting rates, which we think is going to happen in the second half, and then the employment is a lag indicator. The employment levels begin to recover, and we're going to be able to see this more in 2025. Retail trade employment. This is one area that hires unskilled work, okay, unskilled workers. Now, some may say, well, they have skills. What I'm talking about, we're talking, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is having a certificate, having a degree, some kind of skill that's certified, okay? So if you look at it, look, this is again the 2008 recession. If you go like this, where did all these people go, okay? And then this is the 2000, the COVID here. And there's a concave pattern. Most of this is happening because of digital online competition that we're seeing, but also because of what's happening with the economy. And if you look at here, normally it grows about 1%. Look at what it did in 2028, 6.58, never seen before growth rate, right after COVID. And then 2020 kind of came down to its mean a little bit, 1.84. But 2023 managed to post a positive growth rate. I mean, it's stagnant, but it's 0.04. It's just stopped basically growth. Okay? So we're seeing, if that continues, we're seeing some negative, decline in 2024, and then improvement in 2025. Retail has been structurally suffering, even though if the Fed cuts rates and all that, there's going to be still some suffering because of what I said earlier about online. Construction employment, again, this was housing crisis in 2008. Look what happened here. And then totally recovered after COVID, 1.43% growth, grew 6% right after, and then it continued 75% growth. But because of, generational high interest rates, it just declined in 2023. We expect that to continue into second half of 2024, and then begin to recover a little bit, conditional on the Fed beginning to cut rates. Financial services employment is another category of employment that suffered from digital banking. Digital banking, look at how employment went down. Yeah. So it went down in the 2008 crisis and then stayed pretty much with a much lower trend here. And then COVID hit and then became flat, okay? And structurally, it had been declining because nowadays we can do banking, from our own cell phones, computers, etc., right? We don't need tellers as we did before. And then it's stagnant, as I said before, and it's going to post a negative growth, meaning a decline in employment. and then it's going to recover in 2025 as the banking industry recovers. Wholesale trade employment affected by droughts, but not only that, a slowing growth. See these seasonal patterns, very significant, that cease to exist here during drought and also here during drought. Thank you. I should probably take a sip, huh? All right. I was afraid to knock that down, so thank you. Wholesale 1.54%. It grew about that rate in 2021, and then it did phenomenally better, and 4.92% is really good. And then look at 2023, along with retail sales trade, wholesale also posted a decline. Okay, so these are the ones that we're flagging. Okay, the economy, employment grew in January, unemployment went up. Unemployment is right now is 5.2%. Nationwide, it's twice the rate here. So overall, we're maybe doing good, but we're watching these very closely. Okay, 0.55. A lot of warehouses opened up here and there that have affected our region positively. That counts as manufacturing. So it went down, and then we're expecting it to go down further, and then improve in 2025 and do better than retail trade. Manufacturing employment also, these warehouses contributed in terms of employment to manufacturing. And you can see that here, 4.6%, and then almost 4 times better in 2023 because of online packaging, online side of the economy and packaging distribution centers. We expect this to stay positive and then somewhat correct in 2025. So this is somewhat interesting. So we're going to revise this because right now it's hitting our upper bound. Okay. Single-family building permits, very interesting series. 7% typically, that's the growth rate. Look, it grew at 35%, almost 36% in 2021. And then it corrected a little bit to 12.30%, but that was a lot higher than the typical rate of 7%. And look at 2023, it went down by 7%. Okay, so that's construction is hurting definitely. All right, so we expect that to go down further because rates are not being cut, and this is a sector that's being directly affected, and then improve 6.41%, assuming that the Fed follows through with its policy announcement, right, and stay credible. Value housing prices. This is another interesting one. They're going to revise this. Here's a blip here, small blip. So we were expecting for it to be negative, meaning values to go down in 2024. Usually it grows, home values in the valley grow about 6% a year. It grew at 17% in 2021. And in 2020, even higher, 21%. Those double digits are not sustainable, clearly, right? So a correction is expected, and naturally there's a correction here. All housing values declined, in 2023. But if you add the inflation of 3%, then in real terms, it declined by about 4%. Okay, and then here we expect that to continue. However, that didn't happen. There's a blip here, so that it went down and it went up a little. So it's interesting where it's going to go. Obviously, this category is staying alive because of the inventory shortage and the demand coming from coastal areas and whatnot. But nevertheless, you expect the values to go down and then go up in 2025. Inflation rate. This is a very hard series to predict. So we were fortunate enough to predict it correctly. It got our upper bound here, and it's stuck there at 3.2%. That's the stubborn inflation. It's not going down. And wholesale inflation is 7.2. Annually came twice the rate as we expected, as not expected. Sorry, economists around the nation were expecting about 0.3%. It came out at 0.6%. So this is going to have an impact on the Fed's decision to cut rates later than sooner. Okay, it's not yet at the Fed's target level of 2%. Okay, so they expect the economy to slow further. Okay, to cool off the economy a little bit. It's cooling off, but not at the desired pace. Some say this is the new normal. Is it the new normal? You make up your mind. There's certain indicators there. Inflation is not there to be normal. Interest rates are not there to be normal. And there are other indicators, like I'm going to show you now from banking, is not normal, okay? Weekly wages have grown faster than inflation, although that trend is reversing. So we expect wages to grow about 2.7%, about the same pace as inflation. Usually wages grow slower than inflation, and there's normally a real wage loss. Okay, so this is the comparison. Wage growth is red, inflation is dark. And you see that wages have been growing faster. This is very concerning, okay? Valley total deposits. Banks are not getting any deposits. I've never seen this before. I mean, there was only one occurrence like this in Great Recession. Here it's back to back. See, we're going to have to revise this here. We caught our lower bound. So we were optimistic here, a bit more optimistic. And what's the reason? Inflation. The real interest rates were negative. Now they're somewhat positive. That's helping. Investment is going to higher yield investments where the real interest rate is positive. This is the same pattern we were observing in 2008. So hopefully it's going to grow fast. It must grow faster in 2024 because liabilities are growing much faster than deposits. That's not sustainable. Okay. So hopefully at what rate should it grow at? About 8%. It's declined at 144%. After COVID, it grew at 21 and then 10. This is very, concerning here, particularly when you look at net loans and leases. There's a divergent pattern. The divergent pattern was a lot more divergent than now, but still not enough. This was at 9.6%. Now it went down to 6.55%. So it's coming down. Total deposits have to grow hand in hand with net loans and leases. So we're expecting it's going to grow slower in 2024 and then pick up in 2025 along with the economy. So it has to display consistency with total deposits. Valley Bank assets in non-accrual. People are still holding on to their jobs. Foreclosures are at an all-time low. When more people start to lose their jobs, and foreclosure starts going up. And same here, but we do see after this, we see a little, leveling off and then starting to increase non-accruals, bank non-accruals. These are community banks in the valley, like Bank of Stockton. So we're keeping a close eye on this as well. What's affecting it? Rising unemployment is gradually affecting default rates, and rates being, highest in a generation. High borrowing costs are affecting this. So in conclusion, what do we make out of this? Yeah, I mean, you can come up with any story you want. I mean, there's evidence to support any argument these days. But our story is employment levels will continue to decline. At least that's what the Fed wants until the target rate is attained. And what's behind that inflation? Well, price of oil is the main culprit, and regional conflicts are not helping that. Fortunately, Federal Reserve's target rate is within closer reach, according to Jeremy Powell, so that's good. We're closer than ever before, so that's good to be optimistic. But they're holding off, okay, they're holding off, and today's wholesale inflation is not helping that. That's why the market went down today. So home values will likely recover when the Fed begins to cut rates. Non-accrual and foreclosure starts will increase in the coming months because that's a lagged indicator, and then it'll hopefully continue to come down. So closing discrepancy between total deposit growth and net loans and leases, yeah, it's a must, I mean, because banks cannot survive in that kind of dynamic. So that's our conclusion. Strategies to pursue. Some of these are decreased just because it's been a risky environment here. I mean, decreased leverage, lower debt exposure, be overweight in cash, and then interest rates are not going to go any higher; they're going to go down. So there's an inverse relationship. We teach our students whenever interest rates go down, price of bonds rise. So if you buy bonds now, and if you are patient enough, you're gonna benefit from it. If you have the capability to do so. If you don't have to buy a home, don't buy, rent it. Okay. If you must buy a home, do ARM. Okay, adjustable rate mortgage, because rates are not going to go down. They're going to go down. 2 years ago, we were saying go fixed, but now that rates are at max, go flexible so that you'll benefit from falling rates, even though if you must buy a house. And if you're unskilled or low skilled, if the economy does go into a recession, go to college or a certificate program, acquire a skill, so it's harder for you to get laid off. Attrition increases. Delay acquisition that require loan repayments, because what are those? Car purchases, right, or loans. I mean, if you have to pay interest on that, delay, and switch from fixed to flexible rates. Okay, so those are some suggestions. So thanks to Foster Farms, this endowment, we were able to hire more than 53 student assistants. We appeared more than 275 times in popular media like Sacramento Bee, Modesto Bee, even Fresno Bee. I had K-Fox 47 called me the other day and asked about Bakersfield economy. Why is that important? Because when this endowment started, there was discussion to do this only in Stanislaus County, and most disagreed and said, hey, do it for the entire San Joaquin Valley. So we benefited from that. This year alone, we got 3 grants, and then we got more visibility because of that, all the way from Washington, D.C. Congressional Quarterly called us about Bakersfield economy, and then we're getting calls from radio stations there. So this is, and then in Fresno, I can't remember the name, but so that helped us, in terms of visibility, Stan State's visibility. And why does that matter? Because it matters college rankings. Okay, so when you rank colleges, you look at community involvement and things like that. And then how much money did we bring? We bring in excess of $300,000 through grants to our schools. And some of these grants were from San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and then Senate Bill 1, looking at EVs, construction in zero transportation construction. And presentations such as this one. So that's it. I'm thinking.
Good morning, everyone. I guess you're the only brave soul in the front row. Doesn't save the rest of you if I decide to call on you, so just saying. So thank you, everyone, for inviting me back to speak to the business climate in Turlock and Stanislaus County. So today's agenda, I was going to talk about California's demographics, who we are, who's living in this state, because that drives the economic forecast. And then that also, then risks to the forecast as well. And then the state's budget and revenue outlook, because, thank you, that determines how much money the state has for the various programs and initiatives. So really, demographics, again, drives the economics, which drives the revenues of the state. So California demographics. So California's population has been declining since 2020. A lot of it was driven by excess deaths, unfortunately, from COVID. A lot of it has been a little bit of out-migration to other states. California generally is a state that depends on international in-migration to offset domestic out-migration. That hasn't happened recently for various reasons. And so one of the reasons actually is that around the world, people are having fewer children. And there's lower population growth all over the world. And so our ability to acquire Californians from other parts of the world has been declining. We've seen generally really slow population growth. We were originally forecasting that we would hit 40 million by 2030. We probably will not hit 40 million for the next few decades. We're hovering right around 39 million. Our population growth is pretty much almost zero. So you can see here the net population changes in blue. Our deaths are also increasing, not so much as because people are dying, but we have a higher share of older Californians. So unfortunately, a larger share of our deaths are because of older Californians. Our births are also declining. People are choosing to have kids later in life and having fewer kids. So all of these factors together makes our population really stagnant, not growing. So this is just a quick estimates by our Department of Demographics, and they look at really small parcels of land. So we have California, Stanislaus, and Turlock. All three are actually have lost population over the last few years. We do see maybe Stanislaus and Turlock probably recovering some of that population loss as people are kind of migrating around the state and moving away from higher cost areas of the state. Turlock is located relatively close to Sacramento, and so that might reverse some of this population trend over the next few years. So the economy, again, we saw really, obviously, COVID hit us really hard. We were one of the largest states that got hit hard by COVID. As soon as the recovery started, though, we were one of the first states to recover. So that was really good for us. So 2020, we were hit hard. 2021, we recovered. And then 2022, we kind of some hiccups in our economy. 23, we're still seeing a little bit of stabilization, normalization. That kind of happens as we're trying to navigate this new post-COVID environment. What does that mean for work? What does that mean for where people are living and all of those decisions? Sorry. So this is the U.S., California, and Stanislaus County. And so one thing to note for Stanislaus, it's a little bit of a year's lag of data. We will not get Stanislaus County's GDP data until for 23 until the end of this year. So this is looking at actually 23 for the U.S. and California, Stanislaus for 2022. And Stanislaus has generally a little bit of a higher unemployment rate, so does California, than the rest of the U.S. And that's just been historically the case. So in our forecast, which we presented in January, we're going to present the next budget forecast in May. We've seen a lot of what you will think steady state, return to steady state, which is basically returning to normal and a little returning to trend. So a lot of this now is looking at an economy that's maybe not growing really fast, but economists, we worry when things go too fast and too high because that also means a crash. So we like to prefer slow and steady. And so we're seeing continued but normalized GDP growth, decelerating inflation, returning to trend to 2025. We're seeing inflation has been slowing. Just really briefly, a lot of what's driving the inflation now is actually transportation and rents. And so transportation isn't car purchases, as Professor mentioned. It's really car insurance. And why car insurance has been so much higher recently is people are getting into more accidents and more severe accidents. And at the same time, because of the high interest rates, they're not purchasing new cars, they're repairing their cars. So both of these together are kind of, and then gas prices as well, has been driving the higher inflation. And then rents as well. Rents are really a year's lag, or about a year's lag. So when you're looking at current rents, they inform the inflation next year, because rents, people sign leases, and the rents don't really fluctuate month to month as much as other components do. Non-farm employment is slowing down. We saw a lot of people a lot of businesses hired rapidly during the recovery, post-COVID recovery. They've kind of stabilized a little bit. They're also waiting for the feds to cut interest rates, because business sensitive purchases are also kind of waiting, because you don't want to, necessarily build a new factory or open a new store at higher interest rates if you think just around the corner you're going to get lower interest rates. Permits are starting to, had been growing slowly, but we expect that to peak back up. This 135,000 by 2027 in our forecast window is throughout the state. Still not enough to meet our needs for housing. We still have a critical housing shortage in the state, but we're generally moving in a little bit in a more of a positive direction. Personal income growth remains steady around 4%. We're finally starting to see our personal income growth outpace the pace of inflation a little bit. So last couple of years, if you were getting raises about 3%, would they consider cost of living? It wasn't really cost of living because inflation had been so much higher. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's still in our forecast, which I'll talk about later, but a lot of it is from exogenous shocks. No, it's not so much about weaknesses in our economy itself, but things that are going to be affecting from the outside. So this is Stanislaus, really quickly. Turlock, Stanislaus in California. Just the most recent data from actually the US Census, which is a different source than the one I said from the California Department of Demographics. So Stanislaus has about 2,500 businesses, about 34,000 employees, with a median household income of about 76,000, a little bit higher than the rest of Stanislaus County. And then farm employment has been declining around the state, and also here in Stanislaus, and that's just really a long-term trend. A lot of us movement has been going to automation. A lot of it is doing increased output and productivity from, you don't need as many actual farm employment as we used to. So this is really a long-term historical change that's been happening, a decline. If I was giving this presentation in the late 1800s, 80% of our population would be working on farms. And now it's less than 2% and keeps going down. And yet we're producing more food than we ever have before. So that's just a long-term decline that we're seeing. Which also means that those people who were working on farms can now work in other fields that are growing as well. Now, again, Stanislaus GDP contracted a little bit in 2023 just by 0.3%. It did contract in 2020. Obviously, the whole world contracted because of the impact of the public health crisis. Snapped back really fast in 2021, stabilized a little bit in 2022. We'll see what the data shows for us in 2023, but a lot of the growth will likely come from transportation, warehousing, logistics, manufacturing, and even construction. Let's see. So there's Turlock's, it's an area that's growing. It's an important part of the state. We do tend to look at Turlock, Stanislaus County as they feed into our state's economy, population, budget, all of that. So the decline of self-employment, you could see here, this has been a trend in California a little bit more than the US. Pre-COVID, which we consider the post-Great Recession, 2015 to 2019, self-employed workers was about 8% of California's workers. Now it's down to 7%, which has been shrinking. And for the US as a whole, its self-employed was about 6%, 6.2%. Now it's 6%. So they haven't really changed. We are seeing a decline in self-employed in California. Part of that is because, when there's periods of, people tend to like the stability of a paycheck. Self-employed can be really risky. There's a lot of issues there. If you need health care, a lot of our health care is obviously tied to our places of employment. So we've seen a lot of decline in self-employed. And what does that mean? When you're not self-employed, and as the professor mentioned, you go into looking for work and looking for a job. And that kind of pushes up our unemployment rate because they're in the labor force looking for employment. So labor force looking for employment, California, we lost about 1 million people left the labor force at the height of COVID. We're still about 200,000 people short of them returning. And I'm not sure when they'll return, if ever. We might be looking at a new normal now. A lot of it is we lost a lot of people, unfortunately again, excess deaths. A lot of people retired, took their pension because there's a lot of uncertainty. And so, but the participation rate of those who are in the labor force has been highest than it's been in over a decade. So again, this is kind of, and you can see with the prime working age, 25 to 34, 35 to 54, their participation rate has been growing versus not coming back into the labor force itself. So California economy, if you look at some sources, it's great news. Some is the worst news ever. We just have to take it all information together. There are some concerns, obviously, about some weaknesses in California's economy. Our higher unemployment rate, as I mentioned before, California's historically had a little bit of a higher unemployment rate than the US. That's because of a lot of the churn in the labor force. People go to school, we have a lot of cyclical employment with farm employment, leisure and hospitality. And so when they're not working, they're collecting unemployment, and that also boosts our unemployment rate. And then as I mentioned before, when people are coming back into the labor force looking for work, during the period where they don't have a job, they're going to be considered unemployed. Now, one thing to note about this is that this is the headline unemployment rate for the California, which is 5.2%, I believe. But the long-term unemployment rate for California is less than half of the US. So long-term is those who've been unemployed for over half a year. And so that to me means even though people in the short term might be needing to look for work, they generally find employment relatively quickly in California. And that's just because of the size and diversity of our economy, which is, any unemployment isn't good news, but having the long term be less than half of the US average to me means we still have a stable and healthy economy. Job openings for a long time, we saw businesses had been listing their job openings. Pre-COVID, it was about, for Calisfornia was less than one. So for every one person looking for work, there was less than one job opening that they could look at. That's been increasing. So now it was, I think, at the beginning of, in 2023, we're about 2. So there was 2 job openings for every one person looking for work. Now, that doesn't always necessarily mean that just because there's an opening, we're going to have everybody get those jobs. It could be the jobs are geographically in locations that you can't work at. It could be the jobs that you don't want to do. So just because there were openings doesn't necessarily mean all the unemployed would get shifted into there. But it does show us the health of the economy when businesses' confidence in hiring workers because they think there's going to be demand for the goods and services that they offer. They've been cooling. Our labor market has been really tight. The Fed has been raising interest rates in an effort to cool our high inflation. And one of the ways we would see that showing up traditionally would be increasing unemployment. we didn't see that. Even though inflation has been cooling, our labor market remains really resilient, really tight. And so that's been one of the changes that we've seen post-COVID that we normally might not have seen before that. As I mentioned, really had a lot of fun putting those pictures together on the slide. A lot of the uncertainties in our forecast remain. Global hiccups, we've seen recently in the news a lot of the economies that are our trading partners and are like China, the UK, Japan have been slowing down and slipping into recessions. That could affect us in terms of our exports. That could affect us in terms of inputs into the goods that we produce. So a lot of it is things that we're really looking at. California still remains the 5th largest economy in the world. It has been so for the last several years now. I don't see that changing too much. And even if we were to maybe hop over and become the 4th largest, it would really be more of a function of other countries slowing down and less of our own economic growth. So 5th largest economy with just about 39 billion people is pretty amazing. Higher interest rates. The Fed did indicate that they're willing to cut interest rates starting this year, but if they decide not to, if inflation remains persistently higher, we're not cooling down, we're actually spiking back up, they might stop lowering interest rates, which would obviously affect interest-sensitive consumption and interest-sensitive business decisions. At the beginning of last year, we saw like a lot of highly publicized tech layoffs. Tech workers generally are the highest paid workers in the economy. If we were seeing sustained layoffs and that they were not able to find jobs, then there would be weaknesses in the economy that we'd have to, because those would be the most productive workers, the most workers that would get snapped up. So we did see some layoffs last year. A lot of it had to do with tech companies overhired during COVID because they weren't sure about that new environment where a lot of people were working from home. So they needed tech employment. And they also wanted to take that talent and hoard that talent away from their competitors. So they were engaging in labor hoarding. And then they decided, you know what, this is normal now, we're going to go back. They started laying off people. And those tech layoffs, actually, those people actually found employment relatively quickly. However, if we see another round of layoffs, there might be some other weaknesses that we have missed. The Middle East crisis is really the Gaza, Hamas, and Israel. That's concerning to us from a humanitarian perspective. It's concerning to us for what that means for oil imports into the U.S. So there's a lot of things that we look at there. China-Taiwan tensions. Depending on what's been happening with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China might decide to invade Taiwan. And Taiwan is the world's, also from a humanitarian perspective, but also Taiwan is one of the largest producers of semiconductors. U.S. elections are coming up. It's always a volatile times when we have elections because a lot of this forecast could change depending on who the new administration is. A stock market crash, we did see the stock market go down last year, the end of 2022, 23, but that could be an issue for us. And then commercial and office real estate. If there's a lot of vacancies in office space because a lot of office workers are now working from home at least part of the time, what does that mean for the banking lending sector? What does that mean for empty office spaces and how we can use those spaces? And so that's a concern, and those are some of the things that could affect our forecast. So this actually picture on the right is from last year, so you might be in the picture next year. If you ever wanted some light reading, if you wanted to help you fall asleep, I do encourage you to check out the e-budget. This is where every single budget is posted for the state, and you can see where all your dollars are going. Part of my wish is that everybody participates in the state's process and doesn't think that it's so far removed from you. The state's always hearing from people, lobbyists, legislators and things, but they don't really hear so much from average people, everyday people. So I do encourage you to participate in our democratic process. And you can always take a look at that. My chapter is the economic outlook, probably the most interesting chapter of them all. So this is the governor's budget. Again, the state's, a budget for any government is a reflection of its priorities. We do invest a lot in education and healthcare. So this is just an allocation of where the money is going. Now, this was proposed by the governor's office. The legislators are going to come back and they're kind of arguing and debating about where to land with these allocations. And then we're legally mandated by the Constitution to have a balanced budget by July 1st, the start of the next fiscal year. So this allocation might change a little bit. Now, in our general fund, there is actually an increase of ongoing general fund revenues of $3.6 million for trial court operations and maintenance for a new courthouse in Stanislaus County that's going to be opening in the next fiscal year. Sources of revenue for us, personal income taxes. Now, roughly rule of thumb, the top 1% of our highest earners pay about 49% of our state income taxes. We also get a lot of our revenue from sales and use taxes and corporate taxes. Now, if I had a slide from 50 years ago, this would be flipped. We would have a lot of our taxes come from corporations and less from personal income taxes. But over time, that's been shifted. And so personal income tax is the lion's share of the state's budget. Now, we have a projected shortfall right now, which is about $30 billion. 4 years ago, when COVID first hit, we had a much higher shortfall projected because we thought, obviously, really terrible recession, everybody's unemployed, we're not going to see money. So this might change. One of the reasons for this is that when the storms hit at the beginning of last year, the IRS decided to postpone collecting taxes for the entire year until November for about 99% of the counties in California. And the state generally follows suit with what the federal government does historically. And so the state also didn't collect taxes. So for a whole year, we did not know how much money we had coming in. And they decided to, so people were paying their taxes in November instead of in April. So that made a huge difference because we were kind of flying blind. And now this year, the IRS has decided only for San Diego County, which is about 7% of our state revenues. And so they, I believe, are postponed paying their income taxes until June. So there's been a lot of changes, we don't know. And so once those tax dollars come in and everything kind of plays out, we might see a different story. We might also see a lot of it comes from capital gains taxes. The stock market had really decreased last year. High income earners, they have a lot of their money, they don't really earn paychecks, they have their money in stocks and bonds and things, and if that goes down, their earnings go down and their ability to pay also goes down. So it's a little bit volatile. And so that might be shifting now because the stock market's been doing really well. So reasons for optimism for me, if they call economics the dismal science, we don't really have too many. We're always seeing like the glass is half empty for us. But there's still some signs for optimism. Inflation has been cooling. We do expect that once inflation hits the Fed's target rate of 2%, the Fed's going to start cutting interest rates. That's going to boost demand for interest-sensitive spending. Businesses are going to start expanding. People might start making other big purchase decisions, boosting the economy. A lot of the economic growth over the last couple of years has been really buoyed by consumer spending. A resilient labor market, people are working, and when people are working, they're spending, right? Consumer confidence has been hitting a 32-month high, almost 3 years of consumer confidence being generally high overall. So people, they might grumble, they might, complain about things, but in general, people are confident they're spending money in the economy. Business optimism has been a little bit more volatile. I think businesses are getting anxious about the higher interest rates. They're really they're getting impatient about waiting out the higher interest rates. So the business optimism is higher than it had been, but it's still pretty volatile because they're kind of getting waiting. AI has it's a new frontier for us. What that means for the economy is still really unknown. A lot of businesses in California are now locating in California, especially in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, with AI companies. But what does that mean in terms of our long-term prospects? It's still very much an unknown. But it's the fact that if you are one of the forefronts of this technological innovation, you want to be in California. That gives me hope and optimism. Stock market record highs. Last month we hit 5,000 points for the first time in its history. Again, if the stock market continues its record gains, we could see a huge revenue boost, which is good news for us. And then 3 of the top 5 companies are based in California. NVIDIA became one of the largest in terms of valuation just a couple of weeks ago. So along with Apple and Alphabet, NVIDIA is a California-based company. So some of the largest, most valuable companies in the world are located around us. I don't know what, okay. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. As stated, I'm Jessica Bolin, and I work for Retail Strategies. Retail Strategies is one company with 2 great brands. Retail Specialists specializes in retail-focused real estate and was founded in 2005. And Retail Strategies partners with municipalities all across the United States to recruit retail, provide recruitment or retail education, revitalize downtowns, and support small business. Oh, did I go backwards? Yes. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the retail outlook and trends. But before we talk about trends for 2024, we have to rewind just a little bit and speak about what happened over the holiday season. So the National Retail Federation projected that we were going to have 3 to 4% in growth. And it came in at about 3.7%, which is great because, as you'll see, every year except for 2008, we've continued to spend more and more money. But that e-commerce retail is always on the back of everyone's mind, especially for small business owners. There's a few quizzes in here. You don't have to shout it out loud. I'll tell you the answer. But what percentage of retail sales total do you think are online? And that answer is only 15%. During 2020, there was a big fear that online sales were going to become so easy that we were not going to go back into stores, and that simply wasn't true. There was a spike, definitely, during COVID. It hit at about almost 17%, but since then, it has settled to about 14%. And that's because we still need to shop in a store for our daily needs. And that's not going to be changing. We can expect those numbers to grow, but people are still going to be visiting stores. In fact, if you look at the percentage of online sales, really what those big online retailers did was they killed the catalog, and all those people are now just shopping online. So let's dig into the holiday e-commerce. So what we learned is that 57% of shoppers said they were going to use more than one channel for shopping. In fact, they were going to use sometimes more than 2. Yes, the buy online and deliver to home was the most popular. However, we do see that 48% of people planned to shop in an enclosed mall, and 40%, in a store outside an enclosed mall, and 40% were going to head to a traditional mall. There's also 2 forms that are getting more and more popular. They call it BOPIS, or buy online, pick up in store, and we've seen a lot of retailers make new spots for that as it's getting more popular. Another quiz. What is the practice of combining brick and mortar online presence to create a seamless shopping experience? That answer is omni-channeling. So omni-channeling is more important than ever, and this is something that even big business is still trying to figure out. For example, Amazon's pretty much nailed the online experience, but their brick and mortar stores have had some struggles. Meanwhile, Walmart, great in-store shopping experience, but they're still trying to iron out the details of what that looks like online. Omni-channeling is very important if you own a small business. During COVID, the small businesses that were able to pivot and have an online presence, whether it be a website or maybe social media, are now not only seeing more foot traffic, but are shipping goods to all 50 states. So the top 10 2023 holiday shopping destinations. Yes, 58% of people purchased online. But we also saw department stores, discount stores, and grocery stores with big numbers. One surprising thing was to see clothing stores. I think there's a perception that a lot of people are doing their clothing shopping online, and that's just not true. Especially this year, we saw a lot of those retailers actually start to charge if you wanted to make a return from something that was purchased online. It looks like the clothing retailers might be realizing it might be more cost effective for them to drive people back into the stores. There was also nice to see that almost a quarter of the people visited small businesses with some of the programs that they have going for shopping local and small business Saturdays. We're hoping to see that grow. A big shift that we see in the holidays is having an experience for a gift instead of actually purchasing something tangible. Last year, the average person spent $958, and 22% of that went into entertainment and experiences. Dining out at a restaurant, 65% of people. Going to the movies, 43%. California movie theaters had a little bit of a rough time. We thought that Top Gun was going to save us, and it turned out to be Barbie and Oppenheimer that really brought it back. But it's nice to see people going to the movies again. But you'll see Visit a Kids attraction. People are choosing to have experiences over gifts. I find it hard to believe that 10% of people plan to do nothing, but. So that kind of sums up what happened for the holiday season last year. And these trends help to predict what these big retailers are going to be doing in the next year. But before we get into those, we've got to talk a little bit about the retail fundamentals. So you see all the different type of retail and the inventory and vacancy. And long story short is since 2020, there's been no vacancy and rents are high. If you look at the total number, 4.2% total vacancy across the United States. And if you take out the traditional malls that are struggling, that vacancy becomes a lot lower. Another thing to note is that there is only 60 million square feet of new construction happening, and that's because interest rates are high and building materials are high as well. Okay, so these were the national retailers in 2023 that announced expansions. Dollar General, 1,000 stores. I know that Dollar General doesn't sound very exciting. However, when you bring a Dollar General to a small or rural community, it really starts to help to build that ladder of who's going to come next. That Dollar General does well, Starbucks starts looking. Starbucks starts looking, Chipotle starts looking. So these mean a lot to these communities. Another one that's growing and has been continued to growing for a while is Chipotle. Chipotle, during COVID, already had a system in place to order on an app and pick up in the store. So they didn't have to do any pivoting. They already had it in place. And because of that, they were able to stabilize during that time. Now they've got a lot of cash in their pockets and they're looking to grow. So you'll start to see Chipotles in places where you may not have traditionally seen them before. But what we see as a trend is a lot of discount popping up and a lot of quick service restaurants. So the top 10 fastest growing chains and the chains that are closing. Starbucks is number 1. Again, no matter your opinion on Starbucks, they're great for a community to have there. And then you also see some of the closings. And this goes back to when I was talking about retail vacancy. Just because a Macy's announces closings or a Bed Bath & Beyond announces a closing, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It opens up the door for other growing retailers to move in because the vacancy is so low. Just because you see 26 Jimmy John's closing, it doesn't mean that they're not doing well. It means that they sold out to inspire brands and they kind of trimmed the menu down, took a look at the locations, and they closed 26 stores in big cities that no longer had that office space revenue coming in. And instead they're moving into a kiosk system a lot like a Dutch Brothers is doing. So expanding retail in 2024. Again, we see a lot of discounts. So Aldi announced 800 locations coming across the United States. They are not currently all the way through California. There are some stores in Southern California. We're hoping that changes. You'll also see fitness. Working out at home, I think that bubble burst. Everyone's Pelotons are now officially a coat rack, and they want to get back into the gym. And then experiential retail, Topgolfs. Those types of things where as a family you can go out, eat, drink, and have fun. Those are going to be big as we move forward. And then expanding restaurants. We've got the usuals, the Chick-fil-A, the Starbucks, the Chipotle. Cava is a growing brand across the United States. They recently purchased a place called Zoe's Kitchen out of the Southeast. They killed the brand and bought it all for their retail locations. Chicken, pizza, and coffee is always going to be big. But there are some pressure points in the market. So this is the food at home inflation, and you can see how it is outpacing overall inflation. This is part of the reason that those discount grocery stores like your Aldi's and your grocery outlet are growing. This also might be the reason that those quick service or fast food restaurants are growing as well. It's no longer quite as expensive to eat out as compared to it is cooking at home. So food and beverage. There have been a lot of headwinds in both casual and quick service restaurants. A lot of restaurants have been able to pass on that cost to the customer, but there's some things out there that say that might be ending. McDonald's recently did a big price hike, and there was some backlash, and the CEO mentioned that they might have met their threshold and that they just can't be afforded by all Americans. And then labor and commodity costs are too high. And then in retail, so there's a big transition in how we started to shop. Those non-essential stores are really feeling that, and that's because we just don't have the money to be spending on those non-essential things anymore, and we're not shopping for leisure like we used to do. So that we'll see those stores like Big Lots, the Tuesday morning. National brands, and not all of them, pertain to where we are today. But when you get a quick service or a fast food restaurant, it brings a minimum of 30 jobs to your area. You can see that Dunkin' Donuts brings in just under $1 million a year. But when you get a Chick-fil-A in your city at $8.1 million per year, all the jobs and sales tax revenue, it can make a big impact on your local community. All right. So this is where we get into kind of some of those consumer analytics. What is the largest consumer demographic group? I'll hear from someone now. Anyone? It's millennials. So millennials are no longer 22 and wanting to live in a city and rent an apartment. A lot of them are now getting married, having children. They want to live in affordable communities with walkable neighborhoods and downtowns. The challenge is they still want all the fun things that a big city offers. Right behind them is Gen Z. Gen Z makes up about 20% of the consumers. And Gen Z, every day, there are more of them turning into adults and entering the workforce than ever. And they are both two of the sections of what retailers are really focusing on is their purchasing patterns. They're also part of this great American move. So this started in 2015 when millennials started graduating from college, and you can see the transition from urban to suburban and even rural areas. Seeing this, the question is, what can you do in your community, or what can you do with your small business to make sure that you're attracting the millennial and Gen Zers and encouraging them to stay here? So where are we going in 2024? These are the top retail trends. The customer experience. We do not shop the same way we used to shop. They are looking for a new third place, and that is the customer experience. Conscious customers. This is shopping in ways that make you believe in a positive social, a positive economic, or even like sustainable impact. So 92% of Gen Z said that authenticity was the most important value to them. Again, sustainability, shopping local, even your political views, they're choosing to spend their money at different places. Fitness and wellness is going to be a huge focus. I love this category because we're talking about spas, salons, and I'm not just saying that because I like to get my hair done. I'm saying it because these are typically small, local-owned businesses, and Amazon wants nothing to do with this category. And then we also have ease of purchase. Buying on an app, having it delivered, those things are not going away. The easier you can make it for a customer to purchase an item, the better. Omnichannel, we talked about that again. If you don't have an omnichannel presence, it's definitely something important. Loyalty, back to omnichannel. Gen Z said 97% of the time they will look up a company online or on Instagram before they make a purchase. So you have to have that presence. Loyalty. If you don't have a loyalty program, you leave yourself open to a competitor that does. People want to shop at places where they feel like they're a valued customer. And then entertainment. Fun is in again. It took a little while to recover from that, but now we're seeing places like Topgolf, pickleball courts, even shopping centers where your family can go out to eat and watch your kids play at the same time. All of these are hard to do at one time. It's kind of catching lightning in a bottle. However, there was one great example of this that happened in July of last year, about 100 miles from here. One brand does this very well. They brought $33 million in economic value to Santa Clara. And whether you love her or hate her or care about who she dates, she really does give the customer experience, the conscious customer, loyalty and entertainment. And I'm sure if she did a fitness video, she'd break records as well. That's all I have today. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Did you get this?
Probably not. Okay, now we're going to hear from one of my fellow students when I was at Stanislaus, local business, and he couldn't be here, so we're going to hear what he has to say about business in Turlock.
Hello everyone, my name is Brett Tate, born and raised in the fine city of Turlock and founder of Dust Bowl Brewing Company.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brett Honore, also one of the owners of Dust Bowl Brewing Company. Sorry we couldn't be there this morning. We're up in Sacramento at the Craft Brewers Conference. Dust Bowl Brewing, we've had a lot of up and downs the last couple of years, and this year is looking up. We're feeling very encouraged about everything. The city of Turlock is resilient, as are the people in it, and we're thinking that we're going to have a great year ahead. So if you're wondering about the climate, we think it's looking up.
The United States was built on small business, and this town was built on small business. So I encourage any of you to give it a go. If you have a passion and a dream, you can make it happen, and especially in this town. This is a great town to do business in. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm a California kid raised by a family from Oklahoma, migrants that came across in the 30s during the rough times of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. And so I learned a lot from them. We did start the company in 2008, 2009 when there was a recession. And so it just made me more proud to work in those times. That's why Great Beer, Born of Hard Times. I wanted to tell my family's story, and the best way I can do that is through the aesthetic that we put together here. Don Oliver was a young brewer, local, that won the National Home Brew Contest for Samuel Adams, and I just said, that's it.
That was kind of a recognition that I could do this at a higher level, and it would be something I could take to a professional field.
He is the mastermind behind most of the recipes that we do. He is a great leader, and great leaders attract really talented people.
When we first started selling beer, it was a really cool experience. It was really kind of surreal to go into supermarkets and different stores and see a product that we had made on the store shelves. And on top of that, to hear people out there talking about it.
Hops Wrath IPA was our first beer. It's still our flagship IPA. It was born out of the style that we were trying to achieve, but also certain necessity facts, because at the time when we opened the brewery, there was a hop shortage.
It's fun to go out there into these new markets that haven't really heard of us and open these taproom locations that kind of take on a life of their own a little bit. We have hired and attracted and partnered with all these amazing people that have just taken our brand and it just keeps growing.
There's that family aspect to being at Dust Bowl Brewing Company because of a small ownership group. It allows us to make decisions relatively easily. We solve problems quickly because we can directly communicate with the ownership group, and that's huge. The thing that we have that's unique is we're able to provide a broad spectrum of beers. So we cover low alcohol beers all the way up to very high alcohol beers, different strengths, different categories of beverage that we could provide and pretty much get something for everybody that's out there.
We always have over 15 core products on tap or in package ready to go. We also do quite a few specialty beers and limited release beers. We have a 10-barrel, 300-gallon system that we do a lot of our innovation on. And then we also have a 60-barrel automated system where we tend to focus on our core products. We allow a lot of freedom. Freedom allows for creativity, and you give them the best tools that they can possibly have.
I get to be involved in the creative process every day, and that's the beauty of it. I work across a glass window right there, and I can see people in the tap room enjoying our products on a daily basis.
We have a huge organization here. We have a ton of brewers, cellar masters, packaging staff. We have an office staff. We have marketing, accounting, sales, wait staff, bartend staff. It's this large group of people, and what's really cool about it is after work, you could usually find a few of them down here having a beer.
We can have all the machinery we want, but it's really about the people, and seeing the success that we're having and people thriving in their workspace. That's just exciting.
Everyone is involved in the quality of the product. We get buy-in from the other employees that work here. We get people's input on what we're going to make and how we're going to make it and what means quality to us.
We opened a tap room in Monterey, California. We call it the Monterey Tap Depot. It's an old train station. Original foundation was 1870s. And then we have opened also a tap room in Elk Grove, California, Old Town.
It's a really, really great experience. When you go into this place and you look up and you see the expanse of the old warehouse and you sit down around a fire pit with a beer. We are trying to match the quality and the care that we put into our beer into the furnishings and the locations and the experience that you have in these tap rooms. We find a lot of conversion for people that haven't tried craft beer before that walk into some of our facilities and are like, wow, this is beautiful. There's something for everyone in our beer styles.
We're in a massive competition with over 1,000 breweries in California alone, close to 7,000 in the United States. And so it's a very competitive space. We have multiple tap rooms that we will invest in California.
How can we make a better beer? How can we build a better tap room? What else can we do out there? What else can we get into?
We want to get to a point where we have 6 satellite tap rooms in really good specific locations that will help us grow this brand and get our beer in the hands of people that are really going to appreciate it with good beer markets and a good beer scene.
We have fantastic, talented people here at this company who just need the opportunity to do more. We have no plans to stop investing anytime soon with new equipment, new staff, new technology. Everybody is excited about going forward and going into new markets and developing the new products and growing. You can always expect something new here at Dust Bowl.
So it's a little too early for y'all to go get some of that, but you can take it home. Just head out westbound on Falkirk and we'll get you to purchase some and help our economy. So we had a bunch of speakers, and I think all of them. I want to thank the opportunity for this venue to be here today, the Yonans. Thank you for being here. Let us have feedback so we know what we need to include for next year's, because we want it to be productive for you so that your business is better and more successful than any other city or county. So thank you for coming today. Thank you all who participated and who spoke, and please be safe going out. Remember, West, Falkirk, get yourself some taco beer or something. Thank you so much.